All right, everybody, welcome to the quarterly Migrate Zoom.
Video meeting. Zoom is an implementation detail.
Yes, well, that's the implementation we chose.
Yes. One thing I can give a quick update on the progress towards deprecating migration set. And another thing that came up a while ago was exactly what has to happen whenever we are ready to do it, to remove the migrate Drupal sources. Like at some point, we're not going to be migrating from Drupal 6 and Drupal 7 in core anymore. So we're going to want to move those to contrib. And I know that Vicky has a lot of experience with what it takes to move modules out of core. And I think based on that experience, we can start planning. At least that came up, right? Any other big topics to discuss?
Not big, but I'd like to mention the postponed maintainer needs more information issues. Shall I do that now or later?
Sure, why not start off with that?
Okay, it's a small point, so yeah. I just want to remind us all when we're triaging to remember the postponed maintainer needs more information issues. There's one that's been sitting there for 2 years with no reply, so it's it's either accurate or we can close it. And that's kind of my point, is that they kind of clutter the queue. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 that haven't been touched for 5 months. So they might be good for review, particularly from Mike, who's very good at what was the word he used last time about
closing issues. I'm very
yes.
good at closing issues that
that would
close don't fix. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't ever look at these, and I probably should go clean them up.
And they usually don't take a lot of time. So you get a, it's like a triage and bug smash. You get a very quick feel good. Oh, I did something, I contributed. And so.
And these are issues. These are issues where 5 months ago you went through and gave a warning.
I don't think we did on all of them, because some of them are 2 years old.
We may not on all of them, but it's very likely that I did. I haven't checked all those that I just mentioned.
Okay. Let me go next. The deprecation of migration set, we postponed that on a new issue we created to make the get dependencies function return something a little more sane. So that issue is now very close, I think. It was RTBC. Alex Pott looked at it, requested a few changes. Vicky looked at it again, requested one little change. And I think it'll be back to RTBC as soon as we get passing tests. Vicky, do you know anything about that?
Oh, the functional JavaScript tests are failing all over the place. That's what it is. And they have this annoying habit of, first off, they're random to begin with, but then every once in a while they come in pockets, like a whole day, they're just a disaster. And this has happened over the past while. And it's gotten particularly bad and it's not recovering. I will find the Slack thread if anybody wants to read it. It's quite interesting.
Functional JavaScript test rando failures come and go. Yeah, as much as they annoy us, they annoy Jess way more. So she'll be on.
Oh yeah, and yes, yeah.
Well, I guess you are. Yeah, you are Jess too. So. Or
I'm not Jess.
You're Jess Junior, right?
Okay, I'm going to post the link to one of the discussions about it in Slack. I've just dropped it in. They were discussing the test failures. Hopefully that's the right link. I didn't pick the wrong one. Oops, no, that's the wrong
No,
one.
that's the committer Slack. I can't use that one.
Gosh, yep.
I'm sorry.
That's what I said.
I like all the
Yeah.
committers, but they haven't given me access to that one yet.
No, it's just him and Longway saying pretty much what they said in public. So it's, it's not like it's great dark secret. All right.
Well, on the top of the migration set, I haven't looked at it in a while, and I know it's been out there for a while. And we even talked last time, like, do we still want to do it or not? Have we looked recently at contrib space and what we're going to be able to do to replace it? I was thinking about this the other day, and I could be way off, but doesn't Migrate Plus or Migrate Tools use that for part of their syncing stuff? Don't they set a rando syncing thing on a migration using migration set, or am I way off? I could be crazy.
I don't remember.
I'm just wondering if that issue is so old that since it got started, Migrate Tools added syncing using that, and not saying we shouldn't do it, but we ought to double check, and if they are using that for syncing, make sure we have some other sane path for them to adjust before 11 comes out, which they'll have time.
So Migrate Tools depends on Migrate Plus, and my impression is that it mostly works with the config objects rather than with the migration plugins. And you can set anything you want on a config object.
Is there a link handy on the issue I'm not following? Which
Well,
what I'm thinking about?
I'm sorry, what?
No, I'm not following what are we talking about. Is there an issue that I can have a look at, like a link to an issue?
Oh, you want to link the migration set issue in the chat.
I've got it in a minute.
Well, the thing is the configs versus plugins are, nothing works with the configs except Migrate Plus that takes the configs and turns them into plugins through a driver. Everything else works on migration plugins. It was the same thing that that the Drush guys were asking. We're like, we built it to work with regular migrations, but we didn't set it up to work with configs. And it doesn't matter because all the configs are something that Migrate Plus turns into plugins via a driver, which is what everything else works on. So that's not really going to be a thing. Plus, you can't set whatever you want on the configs because they're all schemed. Anyway, keep talking. I'm going to double check and see if I'm crazy or not. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. I could be correct and crazy. We don't know.
Okay.
So anyway, if Alex Pot approves of the issue to change migration dependencies, then I think we're pretty close to finishing off the original issue.
The original issue has a lot of work on it. Yeah. I should just set this to RTBC. There's no reason not to. I was just hoping the test would finish.
If the test
well,
fails,
it's going to be blocked. It won't run because it's waiting for the branch to pass.
Right. But if the branch does pass and then the test does run and for some reason the test does fail, then the issue will be set back to need work.
Yeah, we'll just keep an eye on it.
Yeah, it's near the top of my queue.
And it's migrate critical. How's that? Yeah.
So then the big thing, I think, is what is it going to take to move migrate Drupal into contrib?
Yes, by the way, Migrate Tools does use migration set quite a bit. So something to be aware of when we deprecate it.
Okay.
And you're sure it's using set on the migration plugins and not on config objects?
It's against a migration interface, yeah. It's on the migration. It's not on the migration plugins. It's on the migration class, which is what we're deprecating, right?
The migration class, yes.
Right. Yeah,
Which-
that's, yeah. So it's migration set on a migration class. So it's, yeah, it's not even the plugins. It's the actual migration base class that you can actually change out in the plugins. So I don't know, just something to be aware of. We should take a look at the code and tools and see, make sure we can come up with a different way to do it using, I don't know, state key value, something, rather than just storing arbitrary data on the migration like it has been. All right, migrate Drupal out of core. So my thought on this is that, and I think I mentioned this in Slack or something last time we had this conversation, is I think we should focus on the many steps it's going to take to start pulling anything migration related out of the individual modules that it's in and into migrate Drupal, which is a nightmare. We intentionally put all of that stuff in individual modules because, you know, among other things, some of it we only want activated when the module's enabled. So it prevents us from migrating things that aren't going to get migrated because the module's not enabled. And we've just had this kind of procedure that, you know, if it can sanely belong and live in a module that isn't migrate Drupal, we've done that. But unless we're going to go some insane route and contrib and have, you know, 30 submodules in the migrate Drupal, which isn't out of the question, but I don't like it. We're going to have to find a way to get it all to work when everything's in one module. And so it's going to require building some system that can do a module, you know, scan for what modules are enabled and then know which parts of all, you know, which migrations and which all of those become active. And I don't know exactly what that looks like all designed out. Whether it's an additional set of requirements in the migration itself where they require, you know, some module to be enabled or some modules and then we can exclude them that way, or if it's something in the plugin manager or some other thing that I'm not thinking of off the top of my fly because I didn't put a lot of thought into this before this meeting other than the last time we were talking. But all of those, you know, difficult things to solve will need to be solved so it can live in one module and contrib. So there's no reason why we shouldn't solve them now while we're waiting for Drupal 7 to actually hit end of life.
Yes, I agree.
So for example, the comment module may or may not be enabled. And if it's not enabled, then we don't want to create any comment migrations.
Right. We don't want to run them, or we don't want to load them, or we don't want them to run through the UI, or, you know, that part's even got to get defined.
My first thought is that we'd want to override the plugin manager.
Yeah, that, yeah, I think we're going to have to anyway, one way or another, touch that. I guess the question is just where are we gonna store all the data that, you know, I mean, having all the source and destination and process plugins that are spread around, enabled all the time won't be a problem, I don't think, for the most part. Any hooks or events that the various modules have that only run when they're enabled are probably going to take some consideration. And then the migrations themselves are going to take some consideration. And then all the tests that are spread throughout the modules that will have to get redone. will be the other very, very hard part. And like I said, I don't have it all designed in my head at the moment. I only just have a very top level of these are the things that need to happen. These are going to be tricky. And then these couple things are going to be really tricky. That we should start getting a meta together and listing off and adding issues to it so we can at least kind of see what the scope's going to be. Because to me, that should get done in Drupal 10, assuming D7 gets actually listed as end of life sometime in the next 4 years. You know, I would think we would want to deprecate and remove that module in Drupal 11, maybe 12, whatever. But I'd love to have everything condensed into a module before Drupal 11. And it's a big project. Because once it's all in one module, then it's a lot easier to get out of core. Then you can just, you know.
It's the only way we're gonna get out of core now. Yeah.
Well, right, yeah. But what I don't want to do is whenever D7 actually gets up EOL and the product managers say, all right, it's time to get migrate out of core, to then have to solve all the problems of extracting all of its little tiny tendrils out of all of the modules and putting them into one contrib module. I don't want to solve it then. I want it ready to go before then. Because it really has its tendrils everywhere.
So you would want to start moving things into the core migrate Drupal module during the lifespan of Drupal 10.
That makes sense to me. I mean, I mean, before we do a ton of work, we should probably discuss it with the framework managers and make sure they understand why we're thinking that and that it makes sense to them. But I mean, I think that's the only sane path forward. Definitely should talk to Alex and Nat and see if they've got any other thoughts. But
As
you guys, I mean, does it make sense to you guys or am I way off?
Yeah, I think so.
Except when you're moving a source plugin, are we gonna have to deprecate it? For example.
Yeah,
we're
I mean, we are gonna have to deprecate it and point to the new one. And
So we have to rename them as well. And rename them in the migrations.
well, you don't have to
You have
rename them.
two.
They're in new namespaces. Oh,
Yeah, but the annotation is.
No, you don't have to, because the IDs, the plugin manager will find the IDs in the new space. So calling it by ID through the plugin manager, the plugin manager will pick up the new one. We just have to leave a shell of the old one in there that extends the new one, that screams it's deprecated if you try to use it, and then pull it out in Drupal 11. So I don't think we have to rename anything, because all of that stuff is just based on IDs, even the migrations. The plugin, you can move a plugin around and keep its ID. You just have to leave a copy of the class in the original spot that yells it for being deprecated, just in case anybody did that directly. But because the migration plugins aren't even classes, they're just YAML files, we don't have to do that. The only other point where that gets hairy, I guess, is, you know, if one of those source plugins is in a module that's enabled when a module Drupal isn't, or when migrate Drupal isn't, then it'll disappear. So that might need a little bit of thought there, at least consideration, more than I can do in a live meeting. Because the plugin managers for all those plugins are in migrate. So if anybody's using them, they would have to have migrate enabled. They wouldn't necessarily have to have migrate Drupal enabled. So there's probably some stuff to figure out around details like that. But, you know, it doesn't. I mean, the source, actually, I take it back. I really think the source plugins don't even work without migrate Drupal enabled for whatever reason. Because migrate Drupal does.
I think that's right. I mean, migrate.
Yeah,
Drupal
migrate Drupal
sets up the base
has
source
right has
plugin.
okay, so fieldable entity, which most of the source plugins spread throughout core extend only exists in migrate Drupal. So if you don't have migrate Drupal enabled, you can't really use them anyway, because they can't, the class that they extend doesn't exist, and so they don't show up in the plugin manager. So I mean, I'm hoping that the fact that you kind of need to have the migrate stuff enabled is going to be at least reasonable, because the only other option is to like force you to turn migrate Drupal on if migrate's on for the moment, and I don't want to do that. Like I said, more than I can think through in a live meeting, but stuff to be considered.
The when I was thinking about it, I was thinking from the angle of what module to start with first, and I think content translation is going to be the more difficult one, because it's a translation. It's got other bits, and if we work from there and solve that, then everything else is going to be easier, as opposed to the other way around. I'd rather start with the translations as a given and not trying to tack it on.
As good a place as any.
How
Yeah,
about
well-
moving the tests around? My impression is that that is not difficult. It's just a lot of work. Am I wrong? And I think, Vicky, you probably are the one with the most experience to answer that.
I think it's just a lot of work, and I haven't thought it through,
Yeah,
because the tests, if we just move the tests to migrate Drupal, oh no, they should work, because you're controlling what's being enabled and everything.
Yeah, right up until you've got a mock of a source plugin class or something in the test, and then you've got to adjust it. Like, everyone's just going to need a once over. There won't be a lot to change, and it'll be fairly obvious, but
Yeah. Well,
I
the
think they're all
kernel test
going
should
to,
be okay. I
for
was
the
thinking of kernel
most
tests. There's no
part.
mocking in them. The migration kernel test, where you're migrating stuff
Yeah.
from a module, not other kernel tests doing funny stuff.
I mean, I think if that's the plan, to do a meta and take it module by module, then obviously we do the tests for the the migration tests at the same time. The other question that I don't know is, do any of these modules have tests that kind of mix and match some migration stuff and some other stuff that should stay within the module? I would hope generally not, but I suspect that across 30 modules and 10 years that it exists somewhere where there's some tests where we can't just dump the whole class over. We got to separate it out and leave some tests in the module and not. So,
well, I would be surprised, but I've been surprised before in my life. The source plugin tests are
you must have have you ever read the source code for the views module? That nothing will surprise me in Drupal core. I'd be surprised if we didn't find at least a couple of examples of it spread throughout the modules. I would certainly hope it wouldn't be a prevalent issue.
The views module just uses standard class all over the place, right? It doesn't really have its own classes to speak of. The other one is that the token module still has an info hook. At least the last time I checked, it did.
Well, you raised a good question there, Mike, about whether we should be doing this by module or some other way. Just do one module at a time and move that. Like make a meta, move migrations from content translation and keep it all tidy that way, versus a meta saying move all the migration kernel tests from across all modules.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense to me, because I don't think.
I think it does too.
They would, I don't know how much they would interfere with each other. there are some modules that depend on the other module, and like there might be some, but there's going to be some no matter how we go. This is a web with tendrils that is just all intertwined. I mean, the only other way we could do it, would be to move all source plugins in, move all process plugins in, move all destination, move all migration, and do it that way, which I still think would leave some bits of tendril out there and be a lot more difficult to do. Again, same thing with the tests is like if you did it that way, then you'd be touching doing the test would be very difficult. You have to change part of the test when you move this and change part of them again. Like, it just doesn't make the most efficient sense to me.
I think so too. I just wanted agreement that, that going it by module.
But if we go module by module, there might be, I mean, we might have certain modules postponed on other modules.
Yes.
But we could still, I still think we could do it one by one, and then you're fairly certain getting tests and code that matches all done at once. I think,
I see a big testing issue in our future.
But again, we should write this up, and I nominate Vicky to take it to the framework managers and get their blessing before we do a lot of work or create 30 issues on it.
Yep, I'll make the issue once the meeting's over, so you don't have to hear my clicky keyboard.
Mostly just like I don't see the framework managers objecting, but those guys always amaze me because they come up with something I didn't think of every time. and maybe they've got a way to make it easier that I'm not thinking of right now. So
I'll make the issue and I'll put it in our meta for migrate in D10 that we have, which I'll post the link to. I'll pop that link in Slack, I guess. Is that okay? These random links in Slack I'm posting. That's our meta for D10.
To the committer Slack. Random links to a Slack that no one can access.
Oh, glad to hear I'm no one.
I meant no one in the channel that's except for you.
No. Sometimes I'm overly pedantic.
But yeah, anyway, that's my thoughts on it. It's a big project with 0 rewards, so I'm sure I'll be motivated to help out a ton over the next couple of years. But it will be fodder for migration tables at camps and cons for sure.
Yes, yeah, if we can just divide it up sensibly and all that, I agree. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of work for very little reward. That's which is unfortunate, but it's just got to get done.
Depends on what your reward is.
Well, I mean, hopefully the reward is a whole bunch of legacy code that I don't have to worry about anymore, or don't have to worry about as much.
That's right. We need maintainers for the contrib module. Who's going to do that?
I mean, we will, but at that point, we'll be primarily feature complete. D7 will be end of life by the time. I mean, we're not doing it before. By the time we do it, D7 will have been end of life for a while. So, I mean, it will be essentially considered feature complete and probably won't get much updates once it's pushed out.
Right. So we will probably all put our names on it, but we will also mark it as minimally maintained. So
yeah.
If the consideration or the motivation for this is the D7 end of life, is there a reason other than being a lot of work than D6 migrations that are still in core, if it is also end of life?
yeah, we decided some time ago that removing D6 and then removing D7 would be twice as much work as removing D6 and D7 at the same time.
Okay, makes sense. And I'm grateful that this is still there because I still use it.
Yeah, it would be, there's a lot of code that they both share. So just separating them would be
Yeah,
a
would be a
whole
nightmare.
extra set of headaches and challenges on its own. And if we do them at the same time, we don't. We can just move the shared code all at once to contrib. And
Mhm.
it solves, it's more than just doing it twice. It's that there would be extra tendrils to unravel if we tried to separate them. That
Yes.
again, this whole project is essentially, no new features. It's cleaning, it's code base cleanup, and it'll be great, and I'll be happy when it happens. But it, we're not getting new features or moving anything forward with it. So we don't want to spend more time on it than we have to.
Does anyone have a ballpark estimate of what fraction of the code is being removed in Drupal 10 with all of these core modules that we're moving to contrib?
Not
Is it
enough.
like 5%, 10%?
No, I never looked. No. So what was it, 5 modules? Out of how many? How many modules are in core?
Well, the modules that are coming out of core can keep their migration stuff, which is what we did, obviously. It would be interesting to see what the list of modules that are going to come out of core in 10. I know they're still talking about slimming core down quite a bit. Heck, maybe migrate will be one of them. I don't know. I don't know how far those conversations have gone. And I did not watch
Find
the
the
Dries.
issue.
Did not watch the Dries note from DC Europe. It reminds me, I've been meaning to do that. I forgot. So I don't know what's
There's,
going on with all that. No one has told me that migrate's coming out, but I don't know.
It doesn't, migrate's already approved to come out, so we don't have to wait for any kind of processing.
The
Because
migrate
it went in
Drupal
knowing
is.
it was coming out. Pardon me?
Migrate Drupal is, but what about the migrate API? That's
Oh, were you talking about migrate itself?
yeah, the API mod, the migrate
sorry.
module.
No.
I know migrate Drupal will come out when D7 is, but I don't know if they're going to want to keep migrate API in core or not.
Yeah.
I hope so. I think it's useful. I use it for a lot more than Drupal migrations, and it would not be nearly as effective if it wasn't a core module. But
I personally think it's a good idea to leave it in for a while still. I don't know how long, but definitely.
well, I mean, I just think from one of the things that they look at, or somewhere in one of their categories when they're trying to decide, the migrate API makes it easier to get people that are on not Drupal things into Drupal, which makes it a very solid thing to keep in core, the API anyway.
Yeah.
Whether that necessitates that we add things like Drupal WordPress or like migrate WordPress or migrate whatever into core to support more migrations in from other platforms or not, I don't know. But I mean, the API itself is useful to get people on other things into Drupal, which is a benefit to the community to have that. So I think the API should stay in, but again, that's obviously a decision that happens way higher up than me. So
If I'm doing this right, and you can check what I pasted into the chat, there are 84 core modules in Drupal 9.5 and 75 in Drupal 10. So we moved 9 out?
That doesn't sound right. Oh, you're just doing modules, right? Not themes. Right.
Just modules.
did they move out migrate
RDF
Drupal
how
multilingual?
tracker? Oh, no, not tracker. Pardon me?
Did they move out migrate Drupal multilingual?
Yes, that was removed.
Right. RDF how aggregator. Oh, what's the other one?
Quick edit.
I keep thinking.
Forums out.
CK editor, no, that's still there. Quick edit, color.
Forum, forum is the only one that would really have migrate stuff in it. And even
Yeah,
that,
form's going to be interesting
should-
for us, probably.
Looks to me as though
actually
forum is
migrate
still
or
there.
forum really only has like a settings migration. Honestly, all of its data is nodes. It might have some
Okay.
alters in there. So none of those modules save us anything because those are all features that nobody used and didn't really store data to be migrated.
We get a bit of a win because Tracker's been deprecated, so we don't have to deal with any of the migrations there, which are actually useless anyway. So they can just be deleted. So once it gets into contrib, they can be deleted. They weren't needed. Which is a shame because it was one of my first migrations. And I thought I was doing something helpful. I trusted the people who made the issue, you know.
What's helpful? It taught you how to do migrations, and look where that got you. In
Yeah,
a
more
meeting
work.
here with us.
Yes,
Um,
I get to hear your wisdom.
so are we done with that topic then? Drew? The 7 sources, what we're going to do with that in 10?
Yeah, yeah. I'll make
Yeah.
the issue and then we can start popping some notes in there as they come, and we'll get ping the committers and stuff, managers to have share their thoughts.
The only other thing I was thinking about surfacing at the meeting is just thoughts on now that 10.1's out and we got a new place to deprecate things to remove an 11, you know, what big things do we want to get done in 10 on top of that are going to require deprecations that we can kind of hold off that we can do now? Comes to mind migrate lookup, and I got a couple issues on getting rid of those skip row, skip process exceptions and turning those into flags. I'd like to get those done at some point. And what else is kind of on the plate that we'd really like to get done in Drupal 10? What things do we want to deprecate beyond just the D7 stuff? The deprecate that we're moving, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Nothing comes to mind either for me. There's a small list on that D10 issue, yes?
Are there any process plugins that we don't need anymore now that the callback plugin can take additional arguments?
Probably, but I don't know if they're worth.
Is it worth the work? Yes. I don't know. I would say no.
Well, you know what? If we're gonna move all the process, all the process plugins into migrate Drupal anyway. I mean, not the ones that aren't. I mean, so there's the core ones that are in migrate that are useful generally. And I guess I'd have to go through all of those and see if there's anything we can get rid of for the callback. All the ones that are spread out are pretty well migrate Drupal specific. So, I mean, we can take a glance at them as we bring them in to migrate Drupal.
Oh, we do have an issue, a meta for deprecating D6 and D7 migrations. We have an issue. It's been there for 3 years.
Yeah, that's the one for actually getting it into contrib, but we don't have one for moving all migration code in Drupal into migrate Drupal.
Okay, right. Yeah. Gotcha. I'll do some admin on that.
And then hopefully that means that, you know, when it is time to actually do those, they won't need to be metas. They will be one issue to pull the module out. Or one issue to deprecate the module and another patch to get rid of it.
Yes, well, that's the goal of those huge, long processes that have been created to do that work. I was just looking at the issue queue for things that say deprecation. Apparently, we want to deprecate the D6 user picture source plugin. I can go through the issues and find the deprecations and pop them in there in that in our existing meta, and we can look at them from there.
I actually think it would be
mentioned-
fun to get started on this. And if you want to, if you think content translation is the place to start, then
I think it's
Isn't
going
it?
to expose the most problems, yes. Because it deals with, you know, it'll deal with needing multiple modules enabled to work, not just one, for example. And translations always turns up something funky.
did you see Mauricio pasted into the Zoom chat a link to the documentation page on deprecated and obsolete modules and themes?
Oh yeah, that's, I know it well.
I'm sure you do.
In fact, it's kind of like an albatross right now because it's still got bits that need doing. Like all the testing stuff isn't done yet. It isn't in there.
The other thing that's gonna be tough on this, moving all these migrations is dealing with that new migration state stuff that we just added to show when modules or migrations are done and all that.
Why is that going to be difficult? What am I not thinking of?
Well, each module has a state YAML file in it, right? What are we gonna-
Yeah.
Can we combine all of those into one, or don't they have to live in the module? Maybe I'm wrong.
No. Oh, okay. They have to live in the module because they get discovered that way.
Right.
So it's back to that same problem.
Right.
We need to filter by what's enabled.
So
Another thing
maybe,
that we have to,
so maybe that's a separate problem than moving source process destination and migrations.
state files.
That might be a separate issue. We could do all of those
Yeah.
at once if we solve it.
Yeah. Well, there's already a migration state file in migrate Drupal. We just expand it. I think. Oh, I don't know. You know, we're making it up as we go.
I know,
on.
but we got to figure out a way to kind of make that one a special snowflake that lets us ignore parts of it if certain modules aren't enabled and that kind of stuff. So,
Well, if we start with content translation and we get that module working, that'll be the template for how we do the others.
Yeah.
We would just move that state file and deal with it then. So I guess we're putting all the working pieces in that first test, and then we copy that elsewhere.
yeah, the hard part when you
I
move
think.
all of this stuff in there is getting it to not do anything if if the content translation module isn't enabled.
Mm.
You know, that's
Right. That's why I put
that's
it
the
there in the first
challenge.
place, because it was the easiest way to
Right.
get that stuff done.
Right, and make sure it only runs if content translation is enabled.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the big thing to solve. And I can't even anticipate what the issues are all going to be. We'll find out when we try. But
That's okay. We're identifying them. That's the point.
we will have to probably add some tests to make sure that as we do this and build the system, and even if we do it just by trying a module and seeing what it looks like, you know, we'll need to test if the module's enabled, if it's not enabled. Like those will be tests you're going to have to add at least to get started. You know, go get discovery on source plugins or whatever content translation provides.
Speaking
It
of
does
tests,
provides a few, and you know, find out if you can see the source plugins you moved if content translation is disabled.
yeah.
So there will be a fair amount of work there. But once we figure it out for one, we can probably solve it for all of them at the same time. So we might need like we might need to try some stuff in this content translation or pick a couple of modules to try first, and that'll probably lead us to the kind of global solution for identifying which things should only work if a certain module's in, and then we might have to split that off to a separate issue, postpone everything else on that, solve it, get it in, and then do each module.
I wanted to say I need help with the test, and I can't find the issue that I was working on. Oh, this one. Okay, this issue. I know I'm leaping sideways here, guys. I'll put it, where do you want the issue? Slack? I've been doing Slack. I'll throw it in Slack.
Sure.
So this is a small change. And I looked at writing a test. And I don't quite see how to do it with the way that Open Connection works. And I don't need to discuss all that right now because I've forgotten half of it anyway. But I'm wondering if this is one we can do just by manual testing, because the core cause is your source database driver goes away. And that's not something I can figure out how to do in core because you need a separate database server and you don't have one.
I can't tell from the patch because I got to read all the lines around it, but
Yeah. It's
Well,
SQL based.
could we not just, well, if a driver goes away or
The situation arises when your source database is is remote, and that for some reason the connection dies or it's shut down or whatever, and you're still running your migration, and your migration goes to access stuff, and it's not there. You get a PDO exception. I do think it's the right solution. I just can't. You can't replicate it in a test.
I think about it.
Okay, that's what I wanted.
I gotta take a look at the rest of it.
can't you just mock the database class and have it throw the appropriate exception for certain inputs in the test?
That's what I thought. I couldn't get that to work because
Huh.
it does all this checking on your connection array, your database array stuff, and it just, even looking at the database tests in core, I was getting nowhere on this kind of concept where you have two databases on two different servers. Because of course, you don't have two different database servers in core tests. And I did try and figure out a way to say, okay, well, not that the server goes away, maybe some error I could generate, and I just was getting nowhere. And I said, I felt like I was going down a rabbit hole, and I'm trying to teach myself to not go down rabbit holes. So I'm passing the rabbit hole to you two. And hopefully with your more experience and wisdom, you can find the correct route.
Yeah. I think Benji's right. I don't think you have to. I think all you got to do is mock a database and say get connection will throw.
Yep,
and then
tried
run
that.
it.
Please show me how to do it.
Yeah, I can write one up. Like I don't think we need to test that, because we don't need to test that there are situations where, you know, an actual database will throw that PDO exception. We just need to test that if it's thrown, that we go through this code path. So
yeah,
I think that's easy enough. I just got to look
if
at it.
you can get a shell or something, I can get. The other part of that is the error message. I set it to have a separate error message, or similar to the other one in that class, in that method. But when it's displayed on the screen, it's in that big block message, which I can't remember the details of, like the database server, whatever, and it lists there's 4 points. And it's supposed to be the message that comes from the database server. So that code has to change probably and just use the error message it's given from the PDO exception because it looks wrong. I just wanted to say that. But that's minor compared to getting a test.
Yeah. I think we can figure out a test.
That would be lovely. I'll help you in any way I can.
We can get that line of code to run anyway, even if we can't go get a whole database to fail and throw that exception generically.
All right, I'll be pleased to see how that's done. And again, we're missing Lucas. I've missed him.
Yeah, I haven't seen much of him since he got back to Nicaragua. Coast now, second good. Nicaragua, yeah, it was not Coast.
Yeah.
He, I've seen him in chat here and there, but not
Yeah.
much at meetings or anything. Well, that means he's really busy with paid work. And
Or his family.
23 kids.
That's right, his many children, yeah.
Forgot how many he's got.
A man of
But-
infinite patience. Man, I thought my children taught me patience, but boy, he must have a lot naturally.
Well, yeah, and then to pack them all up and move them from Nicaragua to the
I
US
know.
and back a couple of times. And
I have to
even,
find out what he
I think
does.
last
He
time
does
it wasn't even moving. I think he was here for a couple of month holiday or something, but even that.
Yeah.
No. All right. Well, we're coming up on time. Do feel like this
Yeah, we've
was
done well.
actually a pretty good meeting.
Yeah, we definitely have work to do.
Yeah, yes, as maintainers, we need to organize it and set it all up and then convince other people to do it.
Be leaders. Yes.
All right.
It's also
well,
helpful that the contribution events thing is ticking over quite nicely. You know, can hook into that
Yeah,
easily.
yeah, for sure. Once we get it started, I think that's
Yeah.
really what we got to do is just get the ball rolling, and then once it's done, heck, the individual module maintainers ought to be excited enough to go do the work for their own modules once we show them how to do it. You know.
Well, that's kind of what worked for me with migration because I just had to repeat the same thing for a migration test. You
Yeah.
know, migrate ban or migrate whatever it was. It was a cookie cutter, but I got used to it, and it, you know, the repetitive nature of it allowed me to make all those mistakes, so I could do something more challenging. It's a good learning ground.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, if no one's got anything else,
Oop.
it's dinner time.
Stay healthy, everyone.
Yep.
Yes.
We'll see you
Bye, everyone.
all. We should set a date for the next meeting, but it'll be the first, whatever the first 5 o'clock meeting is in January. So figure whatever that is, I could probably pull it up. The fourth one, the late one, December.
Oh, I think I already did this exercise.
I have January 5th.
That sounds inconvenient.
Yeah, if you look at the issue for today's meeting, down at the bottom, January 5th, tentative. That's what you just said, isn't it?
That is.
Oh, and Dan Flanagan 8 put on the issue for today's meeting, the reminder that he wants you to close the static mat process plugin does not work with periods and keys.
He does know he can close issues himself, right?
Yes,
Okay.
it's just that it sort of has the official imprimatur if one of us maintainers does it. And I gather you've already looked at that issue.
I haven't looked at it recently, but I remember it.
Well,
remember
maybe I'll
seeing
do
it.
it if you don't.
Well, I'm happy to. I don't know if I've commented on it because I haven't seen any anything come through. I don't have it on my issue list. I may not have ever commented on it, but I'll take a look. Tell them just ping me in Slack and link to it. Well, I'm telling you, you don't need to be my messenger. I'll ask him about it next time I talk to him.
Yeah, there's an issue in Bug Smash I need to go back and comment on because of its mildly controversial nature. Person didn't want to do it. I shouldn't say mildly, I should say controversial nature. They didn't want to do the comment.
Yeah.
And it gets that way, you know. That's okay. Although I wouldn't think dots and keys is a problem, is controversial.
I can't find it right now, but I'll find it.
Right.
Yeah, I don't see it, but I'll find it later. All right, all. Well, it's good to see everybody.
Yes, I do. I do find these very useful.
No, they're good.
Thank you for hosting, Benji.
I think once a quarter is about the right cadence for it too. So.
Yep,
Good.
works for me. And
Yep.
no problem
All right.
setting up Zoom.
I'll see you all in Slack and we'll do it again in 3 months.
Bye, everyone.
Kakitiano. Ciao.
Bye all.
Good day.
Okay, I can do that.